But somewhere, somehow along the way, through a loss of childlikeness or areas I preserved out of fear, I have lost so much or so many of those things. But I didn't know it. I didn't realize that it was there. And it's in God's kindness and his mercy that he begins to come and deal with you in these areas. Because you can do all the right things. You can go through all the right motions. And it can even be in Jesus' name. Right. And it can even be good. But at the end of the day, it could be better. Right. At the end of the day, it could be less of you and more of him. And you could love people so well that you actually embody God to people. You become God to other people. I'm not God, but he's in me. So now everybody that's looking for the Lord, where do they see him? In you. Oh, I got a guy that has been messaging me on and off that did some work for me, that always battled drugs, that I would sit for hours and talk with and minister to and preach to and pray with, and he'd never get it. Then finally he moved away, but he still always called. And every time he called, we would have these same conversations over and over and over and over and again. Finally, I was just done with him. It just wore me out. Ever hearing, never listening. And so I just didn't have time for those calls, so I just stopped taking them. But I was the only one, and he needed to know the Lord personally. And it actually made me mad that he didn't know Jesus and he kept looking to me. Oh, I'll give you $1 million. You stick around, watch. I'll confess all kinds of stuff to you. It's just confessional hour, pastor confession hour. But you know what? I have no shame in it. And there's no regrets, and I'm not a victim. It's terrifyingly beautiful. I'm crying and laughing at the same time. Jordan gave me a new word. He called it cryfing. Because now when I thought I understood the sacrifice of the Lord of brokenness, I didn't really. Now when I thought I understood Psalm 51, I didn't really. Because now I begin to understand what real brokenness looks like. Brokenness is in the revelation of my own depravity. I thought I have understood it to a certain degree, but God comes in his kindness to begin to show it to you more. Now, we're going to pray together and ask the Lord to show us, because we're thinking about our dreams, our desires, the girls we're going to marry, the future, our partners, our money, our careers, all the great stuff that we're going to accomplish. And I wonder how many of those things are right but not righteous. How many of those things are our own selfish ambitions or our own dreams and desires that aren't his? Or maybe they were his, but somehow we got sidetracked and missed it. So maybe we forgot what mattered really the most. And there's people in this church, I want you to never forget it. We have young adults that have the full joy of the Lord and the full love of the Lord. And they should not have any ounce of weird, crazy religion inside of them. But if we're not careful, we'll instill the very things that we've lost right into them. Follow me along on a journey this morning. Seriously, listen closely. I'm going to take us all somewhere together. I want you to imagine some things with me. We're not going to sing the John Lennon Imagine song, but we're going to imagine. I want you to imagine. Come along with me on a journey today and imagine some things with me, okay? Imagine having a phenomenal work ethic. Like you have an incredible work ethic your entire life. I've had that. My dad raised me I grew up on 31 acres in Missouri with 175 oak trees, and I had to hand rake them by hand, all those leaves. There was no leaf blower. There was no automatic thing that sucks up the leaves. No, it was piles and piles this high, 10 feet wide, all over the yard, and then I had to load it into the truck and take it down to the creek. Imagine your whole life having a work ethic. That's phenomenal. Now imagine that it's produced incredible results for you. And imagine that your work ethic for the Lord has been impeccable. Oh man, like your desire to be a servant and a worker and to be honorable with the things of God and to do the things he tells you is impeccable. Imagine that. How awesome that would be. Imagine being incredibly patient. Now, patience is a fruit of the Spirit most of us struggle with. Now, the older you get, the better you get. As long as you don't lose some things in your life, you begin to realize and learn through adversities and hardships and endurance and you begin to start to discover that God really is actually faithful, and he's always going to be there, and he's never going to leave you, and you begin to discover the sovereignty of the Lord more than you knew it before, and you're incredibly patient in all things. Like, you got patience. And imagine that you know how to endure through all the highs and lows of life, and you never give up. You persevere through life's difficulties and hardships. Perseverance. You've been through hurricanes, lost a child. You've faced incredible adversity, whatever your adversity is, whatever your kids have done, whatever you've messed up in, whatever's happened around you, whatever adverse situations happened to you in your life inadvertently. But you endured, and you didn't give up, and you stayed patient. Right? That's the case for most of us here. We're here. But you stood firm, and you stand strong no matter what comes your way. You never give up, and you stand firm through life's most difficult hardships. And that no matter what you face or go through, you never lose sight of the mission. Like, you're always on point with the mission that God has for you. Imagine that. Imagine that regardless of your situation or difficulty, you continue the work God's called you to do, and you never grow weary on the inside. There's been many times in my life where I felt like I want to quit. I get discouraged and I get frustrated, but I don't keep it in me for a long time. I get it dealt with pretty quickly. So I've dealt with those things, but I've learned to endure, and I don't get discouraged. I have moments of discouragement, and there's times I'll lean on friends and family, and they build me up and they encourage me, but I've never stayed there. Now imagine your whole life you endure and you stay the course and you never grow weary. That'd be pretty awesome, right? Imagine having no known sin issues in your life and having a real disdain for evil in others and the world around you at all times. You have zero tolerance for evil. Now listen to me. I don't think that I'm perfect. I know that I fall short, but I don't have a practicing known sin issue. Okay? I don't look at porn. I'm not lying to you. I'm not stealing from you. I'm not conniving from you. That even when I talk about my own selfish ambitions and depravity, I'm not practicing something that you could go like, because why? Because I hate sin. I hate it. Why? Because it about killed me 9,000 times. And I bombed it so many times. And I recognize what it can do to me and how it sells me into slavery, and that God set me free from slavery. And I'm not under the ministry of condemnation. God has set me free by his Spirit. Like, I know all those things. And so I don't want, one of the things that I think is a great message that I have is the constant, continuous mercy and grace of the Lord running to him. And I preach that all the time. Run to him, not run from him. But I hate evil. I hate wickedness. We hate wickedness in our land. It's everywhere in our nation. So we're going to do something about it to restore our nation to its roots. Ta-da! And anything that were in the roots that were bad roots, Lord, cut them out so we can just have the roots that were intended of what they were supposed to be. Imagine this. Imagine being so discerning towards false religious leaders that have the best titles, and that you have an insight and understanding to accurately inspect and measure them to see whether they're the real deal or not. And when they aren't, you have no fear of exposing their hypocrisy. Now, I don't call out a lot of preachers and ministers and churches. There's one church that I call out all the time just because they're such an easy target. That's the Westboro Baptist Church. It's completely demonic. Yet they're completely deceived. And still, somehow, God would say, you still have to love them perfectly. I'm like, oh, yeah, well, but I'm still going to call them out. Even in perfect love, you can still measure, direct, and call out hypocrisy. It doesn't mean that I don't have a perfect love. It means I actually love so perfectly that I really don't want anybody to be deceived by that. But that's not my mission. I have people come to me all the time and say, what do you think about this book or this doctrine or this preacher? And I'm like, I inspect it, I check it, I look at it, and you have to realize there's lots of people with great titles and great positions and great ministries that may actually not be from the Lord. And it's okay to call those out, but we're not living on the mission for that. We just don't tolerate it. not only can you discern and expose false religious piety in the religious elite, but you don't have any tolerance for another group of people. I'm going to teach you about a group of people today maybe you don't know anything about. This is going to be fun. Okay? I'm going to teach you 2 words today, and then I'm going to put them together. How many of you know what the word libertine means? Libertine. Sounds just like liberty, and there's the root word of liberty in it. Libertine was a word that was used to describe slaves that were set free in the Roman era. Okay? These were slaves. They got set free. They were libertine. But this word went on to connotate something spiritually. Okay? Libertine people, especially those that claim to be believers to a certain degree, these people are like gypsy spirits. And I've taught on gypsy spirit before. A gypsy spirit is basically somebody that is a wandering nomad. They're not really accountable to anybody. They church hop. They say, well, I like to hear all the different expressions, so I'm not submitted to one church. I go to a bunch of churches. Or they're always moving. They never stay in one spot. They're gypsies. They're nomads. They're wanderers, right? They're always looking for the next best thing. The grass is always greener on the other side. And any form of religion is control. Pastors, government leaders, it's all control. So that they have no desire to be controlled. They're free thinkers, really. If you look up this word libertine, they're free thinkers. So they think for themselves, they're led by themselves, and they even know how to use doctrine to justify themselves. But the number one, I just gave you number 3 and number 2 in the definition. If you look it up in the dictionary, the number 1 definition is basically people that live their lives with full sexual immorality and believe that it's okay by God. Now, I have had friends like this. These are people that just sleep with anything that walks, and all in the name of God. These are people that have formulated their own doctrinal belief systems to suit their own personal needs because they're not accountable to anybody, because if I have to be accountable, then you're going to tell me something opposite of what I believe, or you're going to incorrectly measure me. Most libertines are libertines because they have been hurt by a local church, or they rejected God's standard. Now, I'm going to show you where these people are in the Bible. They're libertines. I'll just give you the exact written definition. A person freed from slavery in ancient Rome, a free thinker in religious matters, uncontrolled. A gypsy spirit and beyond, a person who is morally and sexually unrestrained. Let me teach you another word today. This is great for a Sunday, I'll just tell you right now. I'm laying it on thick on you. But you know what? We need the truth, not itching ears. Do you know what a profligate is? A profligate. A profligate is somebody that is completely shameless in their immorality. Shameless. I had another guy. This guy he said he loved Jesus, but this is the guy that always uses forgiveness as his out to justify his actions. You know anybody like that? These are people that say, it doesn't matter how much I sin, God's always going to forgive me. But then when I point out to them the scripture that says, is God a minister of sin? Should we continue to sin that grace may abound? Absolutely not. Then I show them the scripture that says, God is not a minister of sin, so shall we continue to live in sin? No. We are dead to sin. These are the people that always talk about forgiveness, always talk about God. These are the guys that are extremely deceptive, but they can take it a step further when they are actually Gnostics. How many of you know what a Gnostic is? I'm teaching you something really good today. A Gnostic. You know what a Gnostic is? A Gnostic is different than an agnostic. An agnostic means, in the Greek, I don't know, or to not to know. The agnostics believe that God may be there, he may not be. More probably actually believe that there is a God or a supreme being, but that supreme being does not interact in your everyday life. It's more like the Lord just spun the top. He's there, but everything's going to play out on its own. So God doesn't interact. Your prayers and talking with God and communicating and hearing God's voice, you can't know that. You can't know God told you anything. Gnostics to not know, but an agnostic. But a Gnostic is the word Gnostic means knowledge in the Greek. And what Gnostics believe is that they're divine spirit beings trapped inside a failing mortal world that was actually created by a failing immortal God. Oh, look it up. You'd be shocked at what you find out, the depths of this. The real reality of a Gnostic is that God is not good. And in turn, neither are we. So the only way that God could do it would be to send Jesus. They'll believe in Jesus, but that Jesus came to bring you knowledge and insight to restore you back to who you were supposed to be, because even God in and of himself was not good. Let me read it to you of how I wrote it down. God himself this is the definition of a Gnostic. God himself is innately evil and not good. Sin in and of itself is not bad. Now, imagine tying a Gnostic to a libertine. Sin in of itself is not bad, but rather the ignorance that sin is a consequence is bad. We are divine human souls trapped in the material world, and that the world was made by an imperfect spirit. Thus, the Spirit, the divine spirit, the imperfect divine spirit, sent Jesus to save us through knowledge and understanding of our own selves and returning us to the gods we were destined to be. Gnosticism and humanism are very closely related. And in the Bible, there's this group of people called libertine Gnostics. These are the people that profess to know God. They reject God's kingdom authority, government authority, pastors, leaders, churches. They're gypsy free spirits, and they live for themselves, and they're the ones that creep into gullible women's houses and take them captive, and all they really think about in the name of love and God is getting in your pants. Because they're ruled by their sexual desires. Now follow me.